In the American Mafia, there was one rule that mattered more than family, more than loyalty, more than money, more than life itself. Silence. Men were taught from childhood that silence was sacred, that words could kill faster than bullets, that talking to the government, to the police, to anyone outside the family was worse than death. Think about that for a moment. Worse than death. Not equal to death. Worse. A man could murder in cold blood. A man could steal millions. A man could torture his enemies for hours. A man could burn down buildings with families inside. A man could destroy entire bloodlines, mothers, fathers, innocent children, and still walk into a room with his head held high. Still shake hands with respect. Still be called a man of honor. Still kiss both cheeks and be welcomed at the table. And still be respected. Still be protected. Still be one of them. But if he talked, if he spoke one word to the authorities, if he broke the sacred oath of omerta, the code of silence, he was dead, not just killed, erased from history. His name became a curse that couldn't be spoken. His family disowned and shamed. His children spat upon in the streets. His memory destroyed so thoroughly that it was as if he had never existed at all. In the Mafia, there were good ways to die and bad ways to die. You could die in a shootout, that was honorable. You could die protecting your boss, that was noble. You could even die because you made a mistake, crossed the wrong person, gambled too much, got too greedy. Those deaths, while tragic, were understood. But if you died as a rat, as an informant, as someone who broke omerta, your death would be slow, painful, public when possible, a lesson to everyone else. And after you were gone, your name would be poison. This wasn't just a rule. This wasn't just tradition. This was religion. This was the sacred foundation upon which the entire criminal empire was built. For nearly a century, from the early 1900s through the 1980s, this code held firm. Soldiers went to prison for life rather than speak a single word to investigators. Men watched their own brothers get executed and said nothing to the police. Families were destroyed, businesses burned to the ground, lives shattered into pieces. And still, the silence held, like a dam holding back an ocean. The FBI tried everything. They offered money, refused. They offered new identities, refused. They offered freedom, refused. Because the Mafia understood something the government didn't. There are things more powerful than prison. There are fears greater than jail time. The fear of betraying your family, the fear of your children being murdered, the fear of dying slowly, piece by piece, while everyone you ever knew watched and did nothing. That fear kept mouths shut for generations, until one man shattered it forever. This isn't the story of a small-time criminal, not a desperate street thug trying to save his own skin, not some nobody on the outside looking in with nothing to lose. No. This is the story of a man who helped build the empire, a man who stood at the very center of power, in the inner circle where the most dangerous secrets lived, a man who knew every murder, every scheme, every hidden truth, a man who was trusted with information that was supposed to die with him, a man who killed more people than most soldiers ever see die, a man who was, by all accounts, a true believer. And then, in a moment that would change organized crime forever, he burned it all down from the inside. His name was Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano. Underboss of the Gambino crime family, right hand to John Gotti, the most famous mob boss in American history, participant in at least 19 murders that he would later admit to, probably more that he never spoke about. And by the time he finished talking, by the time his voice echoed through those federal courtrooms, by the time he named names, described murders, revealed secrets that were supposed to be buried forever, the American Mafia would never be the same, not wounded, not damaged, fundamentally broken. This is his story, but it's also the story of fear, how it controls men, how it builds empires, and how it eventually destroys them. It's the story of power, who has it, who wants it, and what they'll do to keep it. It's the story of loyalty, what it means, what it costs, and when it becomes a lie. And it's the story of betrayal, not just Sammy's betrayal of the Mafia, but the Mafia's betrayal of him. Because here's what most people don't understand. Sammy Gravano didn't wake up one day and decide to become a rat. He didn't flip because he was weak. He didn't talk because he was afraid of prison. He talked because the code that was supposed to protect him, the sacred oath that he had lived by for decades, the loyalty that he had killed for, bled for, sacrificed everything for, that code broke first. And when it did, when Sammy realized that the very men he had protected were preparing to sacrifice him, when he understood that loyalty only flowed one direction, he made a choice that would destroy the myth of omerta forever. Brooklyn, New York, 1945. If you drove through Bensonhurst in those days, you'd see what looked like a normal neighborhood. Brick buildings stacked close together, narrow streets where cars barely fit, laundry hanging from fire escapes like flags, old Italian men sitting on stoops watching the world go by. The smell of gravy, that's what they called tomato sauce, drifting from windows. Kids playing stickball in the street, mothers calling them in for dinner as the sun went down. Just another slice of immigrant New York City, working class, tight-knit, traditional. But to the people who actually lived there, to the children who grew up on those corners, to the families who had been there for generations, it was something else entirely. A training ground, a testing ground, a crucible where boys became men, or they became ghosts. Here, in these streets where sunlight barely touched the pavement between buildings, where everyone knew everyone else's business, where privacy was a luxury no one could afford. Fear wasn't just an emotion. It wasn't something you felt when a dog barked or when you heard a loud noise. Fear was a survival skill, a tool you learned to use before you learned to tie your shoes, a language spoken without words. You learned to read the room before you could read a book. You learned to watch men's hands. Were they relaxed or tense? You learned to notice who walked with confidence and who walked looking over their shoulder. You learned which street corners belonged to which crew. You learned which faces you nodded to and which faces you avoided completely. You learned when to speak and when to pretend you heard nothing, saw nothing, knew nothing. This education started young, very young. By the time you were 7 or 8 years old in Bensonhurst, you understood things that children in other neighborhoods would never comprehend. You understood that some men were untouchable, that some conversations stopped when children entered the room, that some questions were dangerous to ask, that some people, good people, people you knew, people who were nice to you, sometimes disappeared and no one talked about it. Arguments in this neighborhood didn't end with apologies. They didn't end with parents getting involved or teachers mediating or someone saying, "I'm sorry," and everyone moving on. They ended with broken bones, with blood on concrete that someone would wash away before morning, with ambulances screaming through the night, with whispered conversations the next day. Did you hear what happened to Sal? Shh, keep your voice down. But did you see? I didn't see nothing. I wasn't there. You weren't there either. Understand? Weakness wasn't forgiven in Bensonhurst. It wasn't overlooked. It wasn't given a second chance or treated with sympathy. Weakness was hunted, like a predator hunts prey. Show fear, and someone would exploit it immediately. Show softness, and someone would test you, push you, see how far they could go. Fall down, and you better get up fast and get up swinging, because no one was coming to help you, not the police. They didn't come to this neighborhood unless absolutely necessary, and even then, they came in pairs and didn't ask too many questions. Not your neighbors. They had their own problems and didn't need yours. Not even your own family sometimes, because in this world, you fought your own battles or you were marked as weak forever. This was the world Salvatore Sammy Gravano was born into, March 12, 1945. The son of Giorlando and Caterina Gravano, Italian immigrants who had come to America looking for a better life. Honest people by all accounts, hardworking. They ran a small dress factory. They wanted their son to have opportunities they never had, to get an education, to make something of himself, to live a legitimate, respectable life. That's not what happened. Sammy was a small kid growing up, skinny, unremarkable at first glance. The kind of kid you'd pass on the street and not think twice about. But his eyes, even as a young boy, his eyes were different. They watched, they studied, they calculated. While other kids played, Sammy observed. While other kids cried when they got hurt, Sammy learned. While other kids ran from trouble, Sammy started moving toward it. Young Sammy grew up watching men disappear. Not dramatically, not with police lights flashing and news cameras recording and neighbors gathering to gossip. They just stopped being around. One week, Tony would be at the corner store, joking with the guys, slapping backs, talking about the Yankees, or the weather, or whose daughter was getting married. The next week, gone, just gone. Hey, where's Tony? Haven't seen him around. Tony, he moved. Florida, I think. Better weather down there. Oh yeah, funny though. His wife's still here. His kids are still in school. Silence. A long, heavy silence. You got a problem with that? No problem. No problem at all. And the conversation would end. Just like that. Because everyone understood. Tony didn't move to Florida. Tony wasn't visiting family. Tony wasn't on vacation. Tony was gone. Permanently. And asking more questions about Tony was a good way to join him. Sammy learned this young. Very young. He learned that men disappeared for speaking too loudly, for bragging about things they shouldn't brag about, for disrespecting the wrong person at the wrong time, for being in the wrong place when someone needed to send a message, for looking at someone's wife a second too long, for gambling debts they couldn't pay, for knowing too much, for asking too many questions, for not asking enough questions, for being weak, for being too strong. The reasons didn't always make sense to a child. Sometimes they didn't make sense to adults, but the result was always the same. They were there, then they weren't, and nobody talked about it. This taught Sammy something fundamental, something that would shape every decision he made for the rest of his life. He learned that fear worked, not love, not friendship, not kindness or generosity or being a good person. Fear, raw, primal, undeniable fear. If people feared you, they stayed away from you. If they stayed away, they didn't challenge you. If they didn't challenge you, they didn't disrespect you. If they didn't disrespect you, you didn't have to hurt them. And if you didn't have to hurt them, you stayed out of trouble. More importantly, if people feared you enough, you controlled them. They did what you wanted without you even having to ask. They moved aside when you walked down the street. They gave you what you wanted. They solved their own problems before those problems became your problems. Fear was power. Fear was safety. Fear was control. So somewhere around age 11 or 12, Sammy Gravano made a decision, probably not consciously at first, probably just instinct, survival instinct. He decided to become dangerous, but not loud dangerous, not the kind of dangerous that screams and shouts and makes threats everyone can hear from a block away. That kind of dangerous attracts attention, gets you arrested, gets you killed. Every neighborhood had guys like that, loud, aggressive, always starting fights, always talking about how tough they were. Those guys usually ended up in prison by 25 or dead by 30. Everyone could see them coming. No, Sammy became a different kind of dangerous, quiet dangerous, the kind of dangerous that moves in silence, that watches and waits and learns, that studies its prey before striking, that hits when you least expect it, that gives no warning, the most terrifying kind, the kind you don't see coming until it's too late. Violence didn't shock Sammy the way it shocked other kids. The first time he witnessed a real beating, and I mean a real beating, not a playground scuffle, but the kind of systematic violence that leaves a man fundamentally changed. He was 12 years old. It was summer, hot. The kind of Brooklyn summer where the heat rises off the pavement in waves, and the humidity makes it hard to breathe. A man in the neighborhood owed money, not to a bank. Banks sent letters. Banks made phone calls. Banks eventually filed lawsuits. This man owed money to people who didn't send letters. The amount wasn't even that much, maybe a few $1,000s, gambling debts probably, but it wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was about respect, about example, about making sure everyone else knew what happened when you didn't pay. 3 men came for him in broad daylight, middle of the afternoon, right on the street, not in an alley, not in private, on the street, in front of witnesses, in front of women, in front of children. They wanted witnesses. They didn't wear masks. They didn't try to hide. They walked up to him casually, like they were going to ask for directions. And then they beat him. Not in a rage, not out of control, not wild swings and screaming. Systematically, methodically, professionally. 1 man held him. The other 2 took turns. They broke his nose with the first punch. Sammy heard it crack from across the street. Blood poured down the man's face. They broke his ribs with careful, measured strikes. They broke his fingers one by one. They took their time. And while they did this, they talked to him, calmly. You understand now? Punch. You understand what happens when you don't pay what you owe? This is a lesson. Are you learning? The man tried to scream. One of them covered his mouth. No screaming. This is between us. People walked by. They looked away. They crossed the street. They suddenly became very interested in their shoes or the sky or anything except what was happening. No one called the police. No one intervened. No one helped. This went on for maybe 5 minutes. It felt like hours. When they were done, they let him drop to the pavement. They straightened their clothes. They walked away. Casual, like they'd just finished lunch. And young Sammy watched all of this from across the street. He didn't run home. He didn't cry. He didn't close his eyes or look away. He studied. He watched how people reacted when they were afraid, how their voices changed, getting higher, faster, desperate, pleading, how their hands shook and reached out for mercy that wasn't coming, how their eyes darted around looking for help, for escape, for any way out, how they tried to make themselves smaller as if they could somehow disappear, how they begged and promised and swore they'd do anything at all. He learned how fear controlled decisions. The man being beaten had choices technically. He could fight back and they would probably kill him. He could run and they'd find him later and it would be worse. He could scream for help and no one would come. Or he could take the beating, accept it, survive it, pay what he owed with interest, learn the lesson. He took the beating, and afterward, bloody and broken, he paid. And Sammy understood something that day, something that most people never understand, something that would separate him from ordinary criminals. Violence wasn't random. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't about anger or emotion. Violence was communication. It was a language. And if you learned to speak it fluently, if you understood when to use it and how much to use and who to use it on, you could control everything. By his teenage years, Sammy wasn't just fighting anymore. All teenage boys fought in Bensonhurst. That was normal, expected, part of growing up. Disagreement at school, fight. Someone disrespects your sister, fight. Someone looks at you wrong, fight. But Sammy was different now. He wasn't fighting because he was angry. He wasn't fighting to prove himself. He wasn't fighting because his pride was hurt. He was studying violence the way other kids studied baseball cards or rock and roll. He studied efficiency, how to end a fight in 3 seconds instead of 3 minutes, where to hit someone so they stayed down, solar plexus, jaw, back of the knee, how to use leverage when someone was bigger than you, how to turn someone's momentum against them. He studied psychology, how to intimidate someone before a punch was even thrown, how to use silence more effectively than threats, how to make someone fear the possibility of violence more than the violence itself. And most importantly, he studied theater, because that's what violence was, really. Theater, performance. And like any performance, the audience mattered. One punch in a dark alley meant one scared person. That person might not even tell anyone, might be too embarrassed, too afraid. But one punch in front of a crowd, that meant 20 scared people. And those 20 people told 20 more. And suddenly your reputation did the work for you. Suddenly you didn't have to fight as much, because people avoided you. They crossed the street when they saw you coming. They didn't challenge you. They didn't test you. Fear spread like a virus, and Sammy Gravano became a carrier. By age 16, Sammy had a reputation in the neighborhood, not for being crazy. Crazy guys were unpredictable, and unpredictable guys got put down, not for being mean. Mean guys made it personal, and personal grudges got messy. No, Sammy had a reputation for being effective. If Sammy came for you, the problem got solved. Permanently, professionally, no drama, no mess, no complications. Local businesses started noticing him. That Gravano kid, he handles things. Doesn't talk much, does he? That's what I like about him, all action. He got small jobs, collect a debt, scare someone who was causing problems, stand outside a store, and make sure nobody bothered the owner. And he did these jobs well, too well, because doing them well caught the attention of people who mattered, people who were always watching, always testing, always looking for young men with the right combination of skills, the ability to follow orders, the ability to keep quiet, the ability to do what needed to be done without hesitation, and most importantly, the ability to live with it afterward, because that's where most young criminals failed. They could throw a punch, they could even kill in the heat of the moment. Rage, self-defense, protection. But could they kill in cold blood? Could they look someone in the eye and pull the trigger because someone told them to? Could they do it and then go home and eat dinner and sleep peacefully? Could they do it again and again and again? Most men couldn't. Most men broke. Sammy Gravano wouldn't. And the Mafia was about to find that out. The call came on a Tuesday. Sammy was 19 years old. A voice he didn't recognize told him to be at a certain restaurant at a certain time. No explanation, no questions, just be there. He was there. 15 minutes early, actually. 2 men sat in a back booth. They looked at him for a long time without speaking, measuring, evaluating. Finally, one of them spoke. "We have a problem that needs handling." Sammy nodded. "A man has become unreliable." Sammy nodded again. "You understand what that means?" "Yes." "You understand what we're asking?" "Yes." "You have questions?" And here's where Sammy showed what he was made of, because he understood something that saved his life 100 times over. Questions were dangerous. Questions meant uncertainty. Questions meant hesitation. Questions meant you might not be reliable yourself, and unreliable men became problems. So Sammy said simply, "No questions. When?" The 2 men looked at each other. A moment of silent communication, then back to Sammy. "Soon. You'll be told where and when. You do it. You don't talk about it. Not to anyone. Not ever. Understand?" "I understand." "Good." They slid an envelope across the table. Inside was an address, a name, a photograph, and $500. Sammy took the envelope. The meeting was over. 3 days later, Salvatore Gravano committed his first murder. The first killing is always different. Psychologists have studied this extensively. The moment when a person crosses from civilian to killer, from someone who thinks about violence to someone who commits it, from imagination to action. For most men, it breaks them, the weight of it, the finality, the knowledge that you can never go back, that you're fundamentally different now, that you've crossed a line that most human beings never even approach. Some men throw up immediately after. Some men can't eat for days. Some men can't sleep for months. They see the victim's face every time they close their eyes. Some men turn to alcohol or drugs to numb the memory. Some men confess. Some men kill themselves. For Sammy Gravano, age 19, it focused him. The target was a man named Joe. That's the only name Sammy was given. Joe had been skimming from gambling operations, or he disrespected someone important, or he'd been too loud about business that should have been quiet. The exact reason didn't matter. The sentence was death, and Sammy was the executioner. He followed Joe for 2 days, learned his routine, where he went, when he was alone, where the cameras were, or more importantly, weren't. This wasn't about being brave. This was about being smart. On the 3rd day, Sammy approached him in a parking lot, late afternoon. Few people around. Joe recognized him from the neighborhood. "Hey, Sammy, how's it going?" Friendly, relaxed, unsuspecting, they talked for maybe 30 seconds. Casual conversation, the weather, the Yankees, and then Sammy pulled the gun and shot him 3 times. Chest, head. Joe was dead before he hit the ground. Sammy didn't run, walked to his car. He drove away at normal speed, no screeching tires, no panic. No witnesses could even say for sure they saw anything. Back at his apartment, Sammy cleaned the gun. He took it apart completely, every piece. Wiped it down, got rid of it in 3 different places, barrel in one dumpster, grip in another, bullets in a third. Then he went home. His mother had made lasagna. He ate 2 helpings. And when his father asked how his day was, Sammy said, "Fine, nothing special." That night he slept 7 hours. No nightmares, no cold sweats, no guilt. He woke up the next morning feeling something unexpected. Not horror, not regret. Not the crushing moral weight everyone had warned him about. Control. For the first time in his life, Sammy felt true control. Not the small control of winning a fight, not the temporary control of scaring someone into backing down. The ultimate control, the power over life and death, the power to decide who lived and who died. And from that moment on, something fundamental shifted inside Salvatore Gravano. Killing wasn't chaos. Killing wasn't emotion. Killing wasn't personal. Killing was order. It was a tool. Like a hammer or a wrench or any other instrument. You used it when it was needed. You used it efficiently. You used it without hesitation, and then you put it away and went about your day. Some men kill and fall apart. Sammy Gravano killed and found his purpose. Word got back to the men who had given the order, fast. The kid handled it. Clean, very clean. No mess, no witnesses, no complications. How did he act after? Like nothing happened. Went home, ate dinner, normal. He say anything about it? Not a word. Keep him close. We can use someone like that. And just like that, Sammy Gravano had passed the test. The doors to the Mafia were opening, and he was about to step through into a world that would make that first murder look like nothing. 3 years passed, 3 years of tests. The Gambino family didn't just let anyone in, they watched, they tested, they waited. Sammy did more jobs. Collections became his specialty. When someone owed money, whether to bookies, to loan sharks, to the family itself, Sammy was sent to collect. He was good at it, not because he was the biggest guy, not because he screamed and threatened, but because he understood leverage. He understood that everyone has a weak point. For some men, it was pride, threaten their reputation, and they'd pay anything to protect it. For some, it was family, mention their children, their wife, their elderly parents. They'd find the money. For some, it was physical fear. Show them what happens to people who don't pay. They'd sell their car, pawn their wedding ring, borrow from their mother. Sammy collected millions of dollars for the family over those 3 years, and he never had to kill anyone to do it. The threat was enough, because by now, his reputation preceded him. Sammy the Bull is coming. That sentence alone opened wallets. But collection wasn't the only test. They tested his loyalty. Once they told him to hurt someone close to him, a friend from childhood. The friend had done something, Sammy never learned what exactly, that displeased the family. Send him a message, nothing permanent, just educational. Sammy didn't hesitate. He found his friend, broke his arm in 2 places, told him it was business, and walked away. No apology, no explanation beyond that. The friend recovered. They never spoke again. And the family noted, Sammy Gravano puts the family first. They tested his discretion. They gave him information, sensitive information, and told people close to him different stories. They wanted to see if he would talk, if he would brag, if he would share secrets to impress someone. Sammy never said a word, not to his girlfriend, not to his family, not to his closest friends. The business stayed with the business. And the family noted, Sammy Gravano knows how to keep his mouth shut. They tested his courage. They sent him into dangerous situations, meetings where violence might erupt, deals where he might be ambushed, territories controlled by rival families. They wanted to see if he would panic, if he would freeze, if he would run. Sammy never did. He walked into every situation calm. Alert, yes. Cautious, yes. But never afraid, never showing fear, because showing fear was weakness. And weakness got you killed. And the family noted, Sammy Gravano has ice in his veins. By age 23, Salvatore Gravano had proven himself. And the call came. Not a request, a summons. He was told to be at a specific location at midnight, alone. He arrived 15 minutes early, waited in his car. At midnight exactly, a man approached and knocked on his window. Follow me. Sammy followed him into a building, downstairs, into a basement, a room he'd never seen before. And inside, 15 men, made men, members of the Gambino crime family. The ceremony that followed is sacred to them. I won't describe every detail, some secrets they still kill for, but understand this. Blood was drawn, oaths were spoken, prayers were said, and when it was over, Salvatore Gravano was no longer just Sammy from the neighborhood. He was a made man, a member of La Cosa Nostra, this thing of ours. He was now bound by blood, protected by the family, and owned by it for life. There was no resignation letter, no retirement party, no exit. You were in until you died. The only way out was in a coffin. Life inside the mafia wasn't what the movies showed. The movies lied, or at least they only showed part of the truth. Yes, there was money. Yes, there were parties. Yes, there were beautiful women and nice cars and restaurants where you never paid. But that was the surface. Underneath, paranoia. Constant, suffocating, crushing paranoia. Everyone watched everyone, all the time. Your best friend might be wearing a wire. Your partner might be skimming and planning to blame you. Your boss might be testing your loyalty by telling you lies to see if you repeat them. Your driver might be FBI. You never knew. You could never be sure. The man who clapped you on the back and called you brother might be planning your murder. This wasn't theoretical. This happened all the time. Men who'd known each other for 20 years killed each other over perceived slights. Brothers, actual blood brothers, betrayed each other for money or power or just survival. Fathers ordered hits on their own sons when the family demanded it. Trust was rare. Real trust was almost non-existent. Because in the mafia, loyalty always had a price. And when the price got high enough, everyone was for sale. Sammy learned this fast. He adapted. He followed orders exactly, not approximately, not close enough, not I thought you meant to exactly. If he was told to be somewhere at 3 p.m., he arrived at 2:45. If he was told to wear a suit, he wore a suit. If he was told to kill someone a certain way, he killed them that exact way. No improvisation, no creative interpretation, no, I had a better idea. Continue 8:48 a.m. because in the mafia, creativity got you killed. Initiative got you killed. Thinking for yourself got you killed. Your job was to follow orders, period. Sammy also learned the unspoken rules. Never drink too much. Sloppy mouths sink ships. Drunk men talk, drunk men brag, drunk men reveal secrets. Never chase women inside the family that caused jealousy, fights, murders. If a woman was connected to a made man, she was untouchable. Period. Never attract attention from law enforcement. No flashy cars that get you pulled over. No public fights that make the news. No loud bragging in restaurants. Be a ghost. Do the work. Make the money. Keep your mouth shut. Survive. Sammy also developed habits that would save his life countless times. When he entered a restaurant, he always sat facing the door. Always. Every time. So he could see who came in. When he drove, he checked his mirrors constantly. Not just for cops, for tails, for patterns, for cars that appeared too many times. When he spoke on a phone, he assumed someone was listening. He never said anything explicit. Everything was coded, vague, deniable. When he went home at night, he scanned his street before getting out of his car. Cars parked too long, strangers who didn't belong, anything unusual. This was survival. This was staying alive in a world where your best friend might be your killer. And Sammy Gravano became very, very good at it. Sammy's responsibilities grew. At first, he was muscle, enforcement, collections, intimidation. But the bosses noticed something. Sammy was smart, not just street smart, actually intelligent. He understood business. The mafia, at its core, was a business. An illegal business, yes. A violent business, yes. But still a business. And Sammy understood profit and loss. When he ran collections, more money came in. When he managed operations, they ran smoother. When he solved problems, they stayed solved. He started getting more complex assignments, running gambling operations, managing construction rackets, making sure the right concrete companies got the contracts, making sure workers joined the right unions, making sure everyone paid their tribute, union infiltration, getting family members into leadership positions, controlling who worked and who didn't. Sammy was good at all of it, and the money flowed, millions of dollars. The Gambino family was the richest, most powerful crime organization in America, and Sammy was becoming an important part of that machine. But with responsibility came violence, always violence. Because in the Mafia, violence was how you solved problems. Competitor muscling in on your territory, violence. Union leader refusing to cooperate, violence. Someone skimming profits, violence. Someone showing disrespect, violence. Someone talking too much, violence. It was the answer to everything, and Sammy was the answer man. The nickname The Bull came from his method. When Sammy was given a target, he moved forward, straight, direct, unstoppable, like a bull charging. No deviation, no hesitation, no mercy. Once he started, nothing stopped him. Not pleas for mercy, not offers of money, not threats of retaliation, not friends asking him to reconsider, not family begging for time. The order was given. The job would be done. That was it. But here's what made Sammy truly dangerous. His targets often didn't see it coming, because Sammy wasn't the obvious threat. He wasn't the guy who walked into a room and everyone tensed up. He wasn't the guy with the crazy eyes and the violent reputation who scared everyone. No. Sammy was friendly, calm, almost ordinary. He'd sit with you, share a drink, tell jokes, ask about your family. You'd relax. You'd think, maybe I'm okay. Maybe I misread the situation. Maybe we can work this out. And that's when he'd kill you. Not in a rage, not dramatically, just business. Victims sat across from him at dinner tables. They rode in cars with him. They walked with him into basements and warehouses, talking, laughing, trusting, right up until the moment they died. This psychological warfare was Sammy's specialty, and it made him incredibly effective. Because when people expect violence, they prepare for it. They're alert, they're defensive, they might escape, but when they don't see it coming, there's no escape. Over the years, murder became routine for Sammy Gravano. Not emotional, not personal, not even particularly memorable. Routine, like any other job. He was involved in at least 19 murders that he would later admit to in court. 19 human beings, 19 people who woke up one morning thinking about their day, their plans, their future, and never saw another sunset. Some he killed himself, pulled the trigger, stabbed, strangled. Some he helped kill, held the victim, drove the car, lured them to the location. Some he ordered, assigned the job to other soldiers, supervised, made sure it was done right. But all 19 deaths he was responsible for, and probably more. Because there were probably murders he was involved in that never came to light, bodies never found, people who just disappeared and no one asked too many questions. The Mafia has been around for over a century. Not everyone gets caught. Not every secret gets revealed. Cars became graves. How many times did someone get into a car thinking they were going to a meeting, to dinner, to handle some business, and that car became their coffin, basements became execution chambers. Quiet, soundproof, private, easy to clean afterward, warehouses, construction sites, boats, vacant lots. Sammy knew them all, and he never rushed. This was important to understand about his psychology. He believed, correctly, that fear lasted longer when death came without warning, when it was sudden, when there was no screaming match beforehand, no threats, no, you better watch yourself, just normal, and then dead, because that created uncertainty in everyone else. If Sammy killed you after an argument, that made sense. People could rationalize it. Well, he shouldn't have challenged Sammy, but if Sammy had dinner with you and then killed you, if he laughed at your jokes and then put a bullet in your head, that created fear, because it meant you could never be sure. Your best friend might be your killer. Your most trusted associate might be setting you up. That normal conversation might be your last. And that fear, that uncertainty, kept people in line better than any threat ever could. Some killings were clean, quick, professional, minimal suffering, a shot to the head, dead instantly. Those were the merciful ones. Others were designed to terrify, to send a message. Bodies left in public places, displayed, brutal methods, torture before death. Not because Sammy was sadistic, but because sometimes the family needed people to be very, very afraid. And fear required spectacle. Every murder strengthened Sammy's position. Each killing brought more trust from the bosses, more responsibility, more power. more access to the inner circle, more money. Murder was his resume, and his resume was impressive. By the late 1970s, Sammy the Bull Gravano was one of the most feared enforcers in New York, respected, powerful, untouchable, or so he thought, because something was about to change. Someone was coming, someone who would change the mafia forever. Someone who loved the spotlight as much as Sammy avoided it. Someone who would ultimately lead to Sammy's greatest decision. His name was John Gotti, and he was about to turn the mafia world upside down. John Gotti was everything the mafia wasn't supposed to be. Loud, flashy, visible. The mafia had always operated in shadows. The bosses lived quiet lives. They dressed modestly. They avoided cameras. They never gave interviews. They pretended to be legitimate businessmen. Sanitation, construction, waste management, boring, invisible, forgettable. That was the point. The less the public knew about you, the harder it was for the FBI to build a case. John Gotti destroyed that playbook. He didn't want to hide. He wanted to be seen. Expensive suits, custom made, thousands of dollars each, perfect hair, styled every day, never a strand out of place, manicures, the best restaurants, the best tables. He walked through Little Italy like a movie star. Crowds gathered. People asked for autographs, actual autographs like he was a celebrity. Photographers followed him, and he loved it, absolutely loved it. The media couldn't get enough of him. Newspapers wrote about him constantly. The Dapper Don, the Teflon Don, because charges never stuck. He beat case after case, not because he was innocent, but because he was smart about jury tampering, witness intimidation, and choosing the right lawyers. 3 major trials, 3 acquittals. The government couldn't touch him, and every acquittal made him more famous, more beloved by certain segments of the public who saw him as an anti-hero, more arrogant, more dangerous. Because John Gotti was breaking the most fundamental rule of the mafia, don't attract attention, but he didn't care. He was building a mythology, and mythologies require visibility. Sammy Gravano watched John Gotti carefully. They were opposites in almost every way. Gotti spoke loudly, Sammy listened quietly. Gotti loved applause, Sammy loved control. Gotti wanted fame, Sammy wanted money. Gotti dressed like a peacock, Sammy dressed to disappear. Gotti craved the spotlight, Sammy worked in shadows. But together, they were lethal because Gotti needed someone like Sammy, someone who could handle the blood, someone who didn't hesitate when orders were given, someone who didn't panic when things got complicated, someone who could manage the violence while Gotti managed the image. Gotti was the face, Sammy was the fist. They met in the early 1980s, not as equals, not yet. Gotti was a capo, a captain. Sammy was a soldier in another crew, but they worked together on several operations, and Gotti recognized Sammy's value immediately. This guy's good. This guy gets things done. Sammy recognized Gotti's ambition. This guy wants to be boss, and he might actually get there. An alliance formed. Not friendship. They were too different for real friendship, but a partnership based on mutual benefit. Gotti needed Sammy's competence. Sammy saw opportunity in Gotti's rise, and both of them saw a problem standing in their way. Paul Castellano. Paul Castellano was the boss of the Gambino crime family. Big Paul, a businessman. He believed in making money, not headlines. He wore suits, yes, but conservative ones. He lived in a mansion, but he kept a low profile. He ran the family like a corporation. Meetings, percentages, planning. He distanced himself from street violence. He delegated the dirty work, and he made millions. Drugs officially were banned in the Gambino family. Castellano's rule: we don't sell drugs, that attracts too much heat from the feds. But unofficially, everyone knew people were dealing, including made men, including people close to Castellano. The money was too good, and Castellano looked the other way as long as he got his cut. This hypocrisy bothered the soldiers. He says no drugs, but he takes drug money. He's a hypocrite. But that wasn't what bothered John Gotti. What bothered Gotti was simpler. Castellano wasn't a street guy. He'd never done the work. He'd inherited his position partly through family connections. He didn't have the respect that comes from blood and violence, and in Gotti's mind, that made him weak, unworthy. More importantly, Castellano was in the way, and in the mafia, there's only one way to remove an obstacle at the top: murder. But you can't just kill a boss. That's the ultimate violation. Bosses are untouchable. You kill a boss, and the commission, the ruling body of the 5 families, will kill you unless you can make it stick, unless you can seize power fast enough that by the time the dust settles, you're too strong to remove. Gotti began planning, and he brought in Sammy Gravano, December 16th, 1985. A day that would change the American Mafia forever. Paul Castellano had a dinner reservation, Sparks Steakhouse, Manhattan, East 46th Street, 5:30 p.m. He arrived in a black Lincoln. His driver parked. Castellano stepped out onto the sidewalk. He was 70 years old, wearing an expensive coat. His underboss, Tommy Bellotti, was with him. They walked toward the restaurant entrance. Rush hour in Manhattan. Hundreds of people on the street, cars everywhere, noise, chaos, perfect cover. 3 men approached from different directions. They wore long coats. Underneath, guns. They moved fast, no warning, no words, just gunfire, 6 shots. Paul Castellano fell to the ground, dead before he hit the pavement. Tommy Bellotti tried to react. Too slow. 4 more shots. He collapsed next to his boss. The shooters walked away, didn't run, walked calmly into the crowd, into cars waiting nearby, gone. The whole thing took maybe 30 seconds. Witnesses screamed, called police, but by the time cops arrived, the killers were gone, and the boss of the Gambino family was dead in the street. The mafia world froze. Bosses were not supposed to die like this. Not in public, not in Manhattan, not during rush hour. This was a message. This was a revolution, and standing a block away, watching it happen, was John Gotti and Sammy Gravano. Sound, sirens approaching, people screaming, chaos, then silence. Sammy didn't pull the trigger that night, but he was part of the planning, part of the conspiracy, part of the coup, and when it was over, when Paul Castellano's blood was being washed off the Manhattan sidewalk, John Gotti became boss, and he rewarded loyalty. Sammy Gravano was promoted to capo, then, later, to underboss, second in command of the most powerful crime family in America. This was the pinnacle, the top of the mountain, everything Sammy had worked for, everything he'd killed for. Money, power, respect, control, he had it all, but he didn't know it yet. He was standing on a cliff, and the ground was about to disappear. The FBI had been watching for years, decades really. Since the 1960s, they'd been trying to crack the mafia. Bugs and phones, surveillance teams, undercover agents, some success, but never the big fish, never the bosses. The code of silence, omerta, was too strong. Soldiers went to prison for life rather than talk. Made men died before betraying the family. The FBI would arrest someone, offer them a deal. Tell us about the boss. Tell us about the murders. We'll give you witness protection. We'll give you a new life. Go to hell. Every time. But the FBI learned patience. They learned to wait. They learned new technology. Better microphones, better cameras, better recording equipment. And they learned to target the infrastructure. The social clubs where made men gathered. The restaurants where business was discussed. The cars bosses rode in. Slowly, methodically, they planted bugs. And they listened and recorded and waited. John Gotti's fatal flaw was his mouth. He talked all the time, and he talked about everything. In restaurants, in social clubs, in cars, places he thought were private, places he thought were safe. He talked about murders, who ordered them, who carried them out, why they happened. He talked about business, who paid what, who owed what, who was skimming. He talked about the family structure, who was loyal, who was suspect, who needed to be handled. He joked about violence. He complained about soldiers who weren't earning enough. He discussed strategy. He named names, and the FBI captured it all. Hidden microphones in the walls, transmitters in light fixtures, bugs in phones. The Ravenite Social Club, Gotti's headquarters in Little Italy, was completely compromised. Every conversation recorded. Every meeting documented. Gotti had no idea. And standing next to him during many of these conversations, participating in them, sometimes being discussed, was Sammy Gravano. Sammy started noticing things, small things. Too many arrests, too many coincidences. Operations that should have been secret getting busted. People getting picked up right after meetings. The FBI knowing things they shouldn't know. Something was wrong. Either someone was talking or someone was listening. Sammy didn't know which, but he knew enough to be worried. He tried to warn Gotti. We need to be more careful. Something's not right. Gotti waved him off. You worry too much. We're fine. But they weren't fine. And Gotti's paranoia, different from Sammy's, started growing. In the mafia, paranoia is contagious. It spreads like a virus. One person suspects something, then everyone's suspect. Gotti started questioning loyalty, looking at people differently. Who was too quiet? Who asked too many questions? Who knew too much? Who could be wearing a wire? Who might flip if arrested? Meetings became tense. The easy camaraderie disappeared. Smiles became forced. Every word was measured because you never knew who might repeat it or record it. And Sammy noticed something terrifying. Gotti was looking at him differently sometimes, not constantly, not obviously, but sometimes. A glance that lasted a second too long. A question that felt like a test. A conversation that seemed designed to see if Sammy would reveal something. Sammy had seen this before. He knew what it meant. When a boss feels cornered, someone gets sacrificed, and the underboss makes a perfect shield. December 11th, 1990, early morning. Federal agents surrounded Sammy's house. Dozens of them, armed, armored, like they were raiding a military compound. The door came down. FBI, don't move. Sammy didn't resist. No point. He knew the drill. Handcuffs, cold metal biting into his wrists. Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. Ironic. Silence had been his religion for decades. Into a car, federal building, processing, fingerprints, photos, the whole routine. And all the while, Sammy's mind was racing. What did they have? How much did they know? What were the charges? The answer came soon enough. Murder, racketeering, conspiracy, tax evasion, illegal gambling, loan sharking. The list went on. And the evidence? The evidence was strong. Recordings, witnesses, financial records. The FBI had been building this case for years, and they had enough to put Sammy away for life. Multiple life sentences, probably. He'd die in prison, an old man, alone, forgotten, while others stayed free. Sammy sat in the holding cell, concrete walls, fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant and fear. This was where myths died, where tough guys broke, where reality replaced reputation. And Sammy began replaying conversations in his head. Every joke Gotti had made, every complaint, every time Gotti had blamed others for problems, every moment of tension. And he began to realize something, a terrible truth. John Gotti was already preparing his defense, and that defense would involve blaming Sammy. The FBI played parts of the recordings for Sammy. Gotti's voice filled the room, and what Sammy heard, it changed everything. Gotti complaining about Sammy, blaming him for problems, suggesting he was too ambitious, saying he couldn't be fully trusted, discussing ways to distance himself from Sammy if things went wrong, not subtly, directly, for murders, for mistakes, for attracting attention. Gotti was setting him up, preparing to sacrifice him, to testify against him if needed, to save himself by destroying Sammy. The room went silent after the tape stopped. Sammy sat there, not moving, not speaking, just processing. For decades, Sammy had lived by the code. He'd killed for it, bled for it, sacrificed everything for it. Loyalty, silence, brotherhood. These weren't just words. They were supposed to mean something. And now, the man he'd protected, the man he'd helped become boss, the man he'd committed murder for, was preparing to betray him, was already betraying him. Something inside Sammy cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just broke, like a bone breaking. Quietly, permanently. For years, Sammy had enforced the code on others, had punished people for violating it, had killed people for even thinking about breaking omerta. And now he realized the code only worked one direction. Soldiers were expected to be loyal to bosses, but bosses felt no such obligation to soldiers. You were useful until you weren't, protected until you became inconvenient, valued until you became a liability, and then you were expendable. Sammy realized he was already dead in the Mafia's eyes. Gotti had already decided to sacrifice him. The only question was whether Sammy would die quietly, whether he'd take the fall, go to prison, rot, while Gotti walked free, or the agent across the table watched Sammy carefully, waiting. They knew this was the moment when loyalty died, when self-preservation took over, when the code broke. Finally, Sammy spoke. 3 words that would destroy the American Mafia. I'll do it. Sound, a tape recorder clicking on, papers rustling, a pen scratching on paper, silence. The most sacred rule in organized crime was about to be shattered, and the man doing the shattering was one of their own. When Sammy Gravano agreed to cooperate with the FBI, it wasn't dramatic. No crying, no breakdown, no soul-searching monologue. Just a quiet room. Federal agents across a table, lawyers, prosecutors, a tape recorder clicking on, and Sammy taking a breath. Where do you want me to start? The agents looked at each other. This was unprecedented. Underbosses didn't flip, not in the Gambino family, not at this level. Start at the beginning. So Sammy did. He didn't cry, He didn't apologize. He didn't try to justify or explain or make excuses. He described murders like logistics, like he was explaining how to build a house or fix a car. Who ordered it? Gotti. When? March 1986. Where did it happen? A warehouse in Brooklyn. Who carried it out? I did, and 2 other guys. How? 3 shots, chest, head, clean. What happened to the body? Disposed of. You'll never find it. The agents listened in disbelief. They'd heard confessions before, but this was different. This wasn't some low-level street criminal trying to save himself. This was the underboss of the Gambino crime family, and he was giving them everything: names, dates, locations, methods, motives. Murders that had haunted investigators for decades suddenly had faces, had explanations, had evidence. Entire cases that were cold, suddenly hot, and Sammy kept talking. Murder after murder, scheme after scheme, business after business, the whole structure of the family, who reported to whom, how money flowed, how decisions were made, how executions were ordered, all of it, days of testimony, then weeks. The agents couldn't believe what they were hearing. This was the biggest break in mafia prosecution history. The wall of silence was collapsing. Sammy never claimed innocence. That wasn't his game. He never pretended to be a good person who'd been led astray. He admitted to everything. 19 murders that he'd admit to publicly, probably more. Extortion, gambling, loan sharking, drugs, despite the family's official ban, all of it. But he was asked once why he was doing this. Why was he breaking the sacred code? Sammy's answer was simple. They broke it first, he explained. For decades, he'd lived by the rules, loyalty to the family above everything, silence no matter what, protect the boss at all costs, and he'd done it. He'd killed for them. He'd gone to prison for them, did time without complaining. He'd sacrificed relationships, family time, normalcy, all for the family. And when it came time for them to protect him, when it was his turn to be protected by that sacred code, they threw him away. Gotti was preparing to testify against him, to blame him for murders, to say Sammy acted without authorization, to save himself by destroying Sammy. So you're telling me I should keep the code that they already broke? You're telling me I should go to prison for life to protect the guy who's trying to pin everything on me? Silence. The agent had no answer, because Sammy was right. The code only worked when everyone followed it, and the bosses had stopped following it first. Word spread through the underworld like wildfire. Sammy is talking. Sammy the Bull flipped. The underboss is cooperating. The reaction was immediate. Fear. Pure, primal fear. If Sammy was talking, who else might talk? If the underboss could break, who was safe? The mafia had always relied on one fundamental truth: no one talks, ever. That was the foundation, the bedrock, and Sammy Gravano had just proven it was a lie. Bosses across New York panicked, emergency meetings. Who else might Sammy have information on? What other families had he dealt with? What other crimes had he witnessed? The answer, a lot. Sammy had been around for decades. He knew everyone. He'd worked with multiple families. He'd witnessed hundreds of crimes. And now he was giving it all to the FBI. Trust, what little existed, vanished overnight, made men stop talking to each other. Meetings became smaller. Conversations became vaguer. Everyone suspected everyone, because if Sammy could flip, anyone could flip. The sacred code, the thing that held the entire organization together, was revealed to be nothing more than a useful lie. A way to control soldiers, a way to ensure loyalty flowed upward, but it provided no protection coming back down. And once that became obvious, the whole structure started cracking. The trial of John Gotti, United States versus John Gotti. The courtroom in federal court in Brooklyn was packed, media everywhere, cameras, though not inside the courtroom, reporters, spectators, law enforcement, and mafia members sitting in the gallery, watching, silent, radiating threat. But they couldn't do anything. Not here, not now. Too public. Too many witnesses. John Gotti sat at the defense table, dressed perfectly, as always. Expensive suit, perfect hair. But the confidence was gone. He knew what was coming. Everyone knew what was coming. And then, the prosecution called their star witness. The United States calls Salvatore Gravano. The courtroom went completely silent. Every eye turned to the door, and Sammy walked in. Not in handcuffs, not in prison clothes, in a suit, like he was going to a business meeting. He walked to the witness stand, calm, steady, not nervous, not shaking. He'd killed 19 people. A courtroom didn't scare him. He was sworn in. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. and then he sat down and looked directly at John Gotti. No emotion, no apology, no regret. Just looked at him, and John Gotti looked back. If looks could kill, Sammy would have died right there. But looks couldn't kill, words could. And Sammy had a lot of words. Sound, courtroom murmur, a gavel. Order, order in the court. The prosecutor began. Mr. Gravano, can you please tell the court your relationship with the defendant? I was his underboss, second in command of the Gambino family. And how long did you hold that position? Several years. During that time, were you present when crimes were committed? Yes. Were you present when murders were ordered? Yes. Who ordered those murders? Sammy turned and pointed directly at John Gotti. He did. The courtroom exploded. Gasps, murmurs, jurors leaning forward, the judge banging his gavel. Order! But the damage was done. The underboss of the Gambino family had just testified against his boss, and he was just getting started. For 9 days, Sammy testified. 9 days. He described the structure of the family in detail, who reported to whom, how decisions were made, how murders were approved. He described specific murders, who was killed, why, how, where the bodies were. He described John Gotti's role, how he ordered hits, how he celebrated successful murders, how he discussed them openly. The prosecutors asked about the continue 8:52 a.m. Castellano murder. Who planned it? Gotti, with help from others, including me. You admit you participated in murdering the boss of your family? Yes. Why? Because Gotti wanted to be boss, and Castellano was in the way. Did you personally kill Paul Castellano? No. But I was part of the conspiracy. I helped plan it. I knew it was happening. I approved of it. The honesty was stunning and terrifying. Sammy didn't try to minimize his role, didn't try to paint himself as a victim, didn't claim he was forced to do anything. He admitted everything, freely, calmly, like he was describing a business transaction. The jurors stared at him. They'd never seen anything like this. A man who had killed multiple times, speaking about it like it was normal, like it was just part of the job. No remorse, no guilt, just facts. And that made it even more chilling, because it showed what the mafia really was. Not romantic, not honorable, just organized murder. The verdict came swiftly. After Sammy's testimony, there wasn't much doubt. The jury deliberated, but it was almost a formality. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the testimony, the corroboration. John Gotti was found guilty on all counts. Murder, conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, obstruction of justice, all of it. The sentence, life in prison, no possibility of parole. The dapper Don, the Teflon Don, the man who had beaten 3 trials, the man who had become a celebrity, finally caught, finally convicted, finally destroyed. And the man who destroyed him was sitting in a protected room somewhere. Sammy Gravano, the bull, the enforcer, the underboss, the man who broke omerta. Then came Sammy's own sentencing. The prosecutors had made a deal. Cooperation in exchange for leniency. Sammy had admitted to 19 murders, 19. The normal sentence for that would be life. Multiple life sentences, die in prison, no question. But Sammy had cooperated, had testified, had helped convict not just Gotti, but dozens of other made men. His testimony led to over 40 convictions, entire families decimated, so the government had to honor the deal. The sentence was announced, 5 years, 5. For 19 admitted murders. The courtroom was silent. Families of victims sat in shock. 5 years, their loved ones were dead, murdered in cold blood, and the man who admitted to killing them would be out in 5 years. It felt obscene. It felt wrong, but it was legal. The judge explained, Mr. Gravano's cooperation has been unprecedented. Without his testimony, many dangerous criminals would still be free. Justice sometimes requires difficult compromises. The families didn't care about the explanation. They wanted justice, real justice, not a deal, not a compromise. Their loved ones were still dead, and Sammy Gravano would be free. Inside the mafia, the reaction was different. 5 years for 19 murders? The message was clear. Cooperation pays. Breaking omerta gets you a light sentence. Staying silent gets you life. The calculus had changed. Forever. Sammy served his 5 years. When he was released, the government gave him a new identity, new name, new background, new city, witness protection. This was supposed to be the end of the story. Sammy Gravano disappears into America, lives quietly, dies an old man under a different name. Nobody ever hears from him again. That's not what happened. The first few years were difficult. Sammy tried to adjust. New city, Arizona, it would later be revealed. New life, new routine, normal job, normal neighbors, normal conversations about normal things. But normal felt wrong. The adrenaline was gone. The power was gone. The respect was gone. The fear in people's eyes when they saw him, gone. He was nobody, just another middle-aged guy, anonymous, invisible, for a man who had controlled life and death and who had been feared across New York, who had commanded respect with a look. This was torture. Sammy started getting restless. He couldn't sleep, couldn't settle, couldn't adjust to civilian life because he'd never been a civilian. He'd been a killer since 19 years old. Violence was his language, power was his oxygen, and now he had neither. Some nights, Sammy lay awake, replaying moments, not with guilt. Sammy never expressed real remorse, but with memory, the faces, the silence before the shots. The control he'd felt, the fear in others' eyes, the respect. He missed it, all of it. Eventually, something familiar called him back. Not the mafia. That bridge was burned forever. But crime, money, risk, power. In Arizona, far from New York's alleys and Brooklyn's corners, Sammy Gravano started a new criminal enterprise. Drugs, ecstasy specifically, a massive operation, distribution, sales, money laundering. He recruited people, built a network, made millions. It wasn't the mafia. There was no code, no family, no structure, just business, illegal business. And for a while, it worked. Sammy was back, not as powerful as before, but active, relevant, in control again. Until 2000, the arrest came again. Police, federal agents, raids. Not the mafia this time, just law enforcement doing their job. No loyalty to betray, no code to break. Just charges, drug trafficking, distribution, money laundering. And this time there was no deal to be made, no testimony to trade, nothing to offer. Sammy Gravano went back to prison. Older, heavier, slower. The bull had lost his charge. Today, Sammy Gravano is an old man, released from prison in 2017, living somewhere quietly, occasionally giving interviews, sometimes appearing on podcasts, telling his story, still not apologizing, still not showing remorse, just existing. The mafia never forgave him. How could they? He broke the most sacred rule. He destroyed the myth of omerta. He proved that anyone could flip. Law enforcement never fully trusted him. He was useful, yes. His testimony was valuable. But he was still a murderer, still a criminal, still someone who had taken 19 lives, at minimum. The public sees him as a contradiction, a man who admitted to murder and walked free, a man who destroyed an empire and lived to tell about it. A man who was both villain and witness, monster and collaborator. History doesn't judge simply, but history remembers impact. And Sammy's impact was enormous. Before Sammy Gravano testified, omerta was law, sacred, unbreakable. Men died rather than speak. After Sammy testified, the floodgates opened. Other mobsters saw what happened. Sammy cooperated. Gotti got life. Sammy got 5 years. The math was simple. Stay silent, die in prison. Cooperate, maybe walk free. Over the next decade, dozens of made men flipped, testified, broke the code. Entire families collapsed, not because of FBI pressure, but because no one trusted anyone anymore. The paranoia that had always existed intensified. Every conversation became suspicious. Every arrest meant someone might flip. The mafia still exists today, but it's a shadow, weak, fractured, paranoid. Nothing like the empire it once was. And while many factors contributed to its decline, one man's testimony started the collapse. Sammy the Bull Gravano, the man who broke omerta, the man who proved the code was a lie, the man who showed that loyalty only went one direction. And when that became clear, when everyone understood that the bosses would sacrifice anyone to save themselves, the code lost its power, and the mafia lost its foundation. In the end, what was Sammy Gravano? A monster? Yes. He killed 19 people that we know about, destroyed families, caused immeasurable pain. A traitor, by the Mafia's standards? Absolutely. He broke the most sacred oath, violated omertà, destroyed the very organization he'd served. A victim, in a way, betrayed by the same code he'd lived by, set up to take the fall, used and discarded. A survivor? Undeniably. He made the choice that kept him alive, that gave him a chance at freedom, that let him see his children grow up. The truth is probably all of these things, and none of them, because Sammy Gravano defies simple categorization. He was a product of a world most people can't imagine, where violence is normal, where death is currency, where loyalty is conditional, where survival means doing whatever it takes. Some say he betrayed everyone, others say everyone betrayed him first, but the deeper truth is darker. Sammy Gravano proved something terrifying about the Mafia. The code was always a lie. Omertà existed to protect bosses, not soldiers. Loyalty flowed upward, never down. And when push came to shove, when it was your life or theirs, everyone chose themselves. The bosses who ordered him to kill, the family that promised to protect him, the code that was supposed to be sacred, all of it was conditional. All of it had a price. And when Sammy realized that, when he understood that he was already being sacrificed, he made a choice that destroyed the American Mafia's greatest weapon, fear, because once everyone knew that even the underboss could flip, that even the most trusted soldiers could break, that the code wasn't really sacred, the fear of breaking it disappeared. And without that fear, the whole structure collapsed. The Mafia believed silence was eternal. They were wrong. Silence survives only as long as fear is stronger than self-preservation, only as long as loyalty is reciprocal, only as long as the code protects everyone equally. And it didn't. It never did. Sammy Gravano chose survival, and in doing so, he exposed the lie at the heart of the underworld, that power is loyalty, that honor is permanent, that silence can never be broken. All lies. Power is temporary, honor is negotiable, and silence can always be broken. You just need the right motivation. For Sammy, that motivation was simple. The men he'd killed for were preparing to kill him, not with bullets, with testimony, with betrayal, with sacrifice. So he spoke first, and when he did, the world listened. Somewhere today, an old man sits in a quiet place. His real name might not even be Salvatore Gravano anymore. He has no empire, no power, no army of soldiers, no fear in people's eyes when he walks by, just time and memories, and the knowledge that when he spoke, when he broke the sacred code, when he said the names and described the murders and told the truth, everything changed. The Mafia never recovered. Not really. It still exists, but it's a whisper of what it was, weak, scared, looking over its shoulder, because Sammy Gravano taught them a lesson. The code only works if everyone believes in it, and he proved it was worth nothing. And once that belief is gone, it never comes back.